$300,000 many times, but this is something that we work toward the independence of the legislative branch, and by not recognizing, not the people didn't get their money's worth on this budget, not because of spending, but because of a large amount of the budget not being recognized. It needs to be a true document to be a planning document, and this one wasn't. So that's the biggest problem that I had, that we just didn't go far enough. We weren't transparent with the people. We didn't tell the people where we really stood. Now we'll see what happens with that money next year, and I hope that I hope we use it in conservative manners for the betterment of all the citizens. But you know, that remains to be seen.
But to have a complete budget, you're supposed to have all your dollars accounted for. Okay, now we've got, at least they have admitted 125 million extra in the bank that's not been accounted for. We actually think it's closer to 200 million in the bank that's not accounted for. They did not call a funding board meeting for the schedule for you know, in April, May, whenever we typically do that, to reconcile that for our budget. I don't know, we may have done that before sometime, Jay, but I don't ever remember that being done. So therefore we have money in the bank that's not accounted for. And so what we were trying to do is say, all right, we've got this extra $100 million on there. Let's put it towards things that's going to help Tennesseans, or let's put it in the rainy day fund. I don't think we've even recognized this money, this extra money is even going into the rainy day fund. So therefore, it's money in the bank, which they can spend now that the legislature's out of town. So that could be troubling also. So and I think I'm right on that assessment. Am I not, Mr. Troy?
Well, there's some question about that, but there, you know, an expansion. It depends on what exactly the budget document says, but you know, we don't want to sort of take that chance. But look at it the opposite way. What if revenues, and how they're going to get away with this is because revenues are going up. What if they all of a sudden started tanking down, and we got halfway through this budget year, and we didn't recognize this money? You know, it works both ways. So it's just not good. It's not fiscally responsible to do it this way.
Mr. Leader, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we've got something in the code that when the funding board sees that there needs to be some changes made, they are supposed to meet. Am I not correct in that?
Yes, and that's the legislature set up this funding board, and fiscal review has done a great job, but we just didn't follow through with it this time. Now, if it's a blip, that's fine. We get on track next year. But if it's a trend, it should be a worrisome trend for Tennesseans.
Talk a little bit about the Country Music Museum and the pork, if it was in the budget. That just, you know, the kind of, and how that just kind of flared up there at the end. Just sort of how you view that at this point.
Well, there's a friend of mine who did a report in one of the papers, and I thought it was a good story. And she was actually extolling the virtues of that museum and how it's a worthwhile project. And I think it is a worthwhile project. But when you send money, $500,000 to Virginia, when you've got museums in Tennessee that aren't fully funded, and that's a problem. But not only museums, you know, we were proposing, you know, waiving the fee on the GED, and last time we did that, we just went through the roof, people applying to get their GED, and that makes people job worthy. When we did the jobs tour, all these CEOs of these companies here in Tennessee said, you know, your technology centers are superb, and we do technology centers better than anybody. That's an untold story here in the state also. Everybody bragged on our technology centers. Not so much on our high schools and what we're graduating, but our technology centers, they were raving about them. But they're saying they need more equipment to prepare more people, more welders, more millwrights and things like that. We want to put, it was 18 million? 19 million into those projects to help prepare people for jobs. And there's a number of other worthy projects that we could have used as opposed to sending $500,000 to the state of Virginia. That was our concern, that we left a lot of things on the table that were worthwhile right here at home, and we didn't need to be funding the state of Virginia for something, even though worthy projects. But we've got a lot of worthy projects here that the state of Virginia is not helping us fund.
Mr. Leader, I think it's important to note about the $1 million that went to Oak Ridge for their community college and what didn't happen.
Well, that's a story in and of itself, and that's the way we could have worked through this budget. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we appropriated $90 million for upgrades on community colleges. TBR took the lead to say which one of those colleges there were. There were 9 of them. 4 of them got funded completely. 5 of them were left a little short. 1 of them being Roane State. It's a worthy project. But we had a plan where not only Roane State, but Walters State, Chattanooga State, Jackson State, and Dyersburg State would have gotten their $1 million and been able to finish their projects. Would have taken it out of the local category, brought it statewide, and all those community colleges would have benefited. But there was no even thinking about talking to the other side about changing the budget to include that.
And that would have spread it out across the state. It would have been a statewide project as opposed to a local project, just who happens to be in the chairman of finance of the Senate's home district. So, you know, so.
Are there other
Is that in his
projects?
district or Yeager's?
Well, no, I think it's in Anderson County.
It's in Oak Creek.
It's the Oak
It
Ridge
is.
Center for Rome State. Yeah.
Are there other projects that are concerning to you or spending that you don't think should have been in there that could have gone to other more worthy areas?
Well, it's a matter of balance, and it's, you know, you have to pick and choose, and all of these projects are worth it. Don't get me wrong, every one of them, but when you say your budget parameters are, you don't want local ones, you want at least regional, then you work away where you have those projects, and you try to make it transparent and fair. And I think the community college example is the best one. We could have fulfilled our commitment that we came up short with a couple of years ago for all 5, and now we've singled one out. Now, what do the others say, you know?
Yeah.
Is it going to be next year, everybody's going to be running up here grabbing for their own? That's what we were trying to get away from.
And another worthy project, the connectivity. Well, we were trying to get all of our internet, all of our high schools and middle schools hooked up to the internet, and we cut that funding, and we offered to restore that funding in our budget, and to help our schools be to access the information out there to better teach our students. That was what we wanted to see put in there too, and that could have been easily done with some of the money that was not reconciled in the budget, the $100 million or so that they have identified, or it could have been partially funded by the money that went to Virginia.
And also the public television, they cut it in half,
Yeah.
from 500,000 to 250. You know why they did that? Because they could.
And if you're going to talk about the Virginia project being totally about arts, I mean, there's nothing more important to arts than the state of Tennessee, maybe this country, than public television.
Chairman,
I thought that they had restored the $2 million for the interconnect.
Yes, they restored it, but by switching things internally in the budget. That meant something, and I don't remember what it was, something had to be reduced to restore that $2 million. So we were talking going about outside of the budget, recognize some additional money, and the money we recognized was from a bill that had passed and wasn't recognized in the budget. There again, we could have done it without any problem with the technical budget itself. But
Chairman, what was the net cut to higher ed operating, not capital, but operating, and what effect do you think that'll have on tuition this summer when they make their decisions?
Well, that's a good question, Rick. Remember, the governor requested a 2% cut to higher education at the beginning of this year in his budget, and they did that. So it's 2%. It equates to about $17 million, and that equates. And then when that 2% was in effect, tuition talks started coming, and there was sort of acquiescence into saying that the tuition is going to go up anywhere from 6% at University of Tennessee Knoxville, 10%, so anywhere from 6 to 10%. If we had restored that 2% cut, we could have cut that increase in half. In other words, instead of 6 to 10%, we could have gone to 3 to 7%.
Wasn't there some money, though, that sort of offset that?
There was,
Yeah.
you know, with the Complete
Like 20
College
million
Act.
or-
Yeah, there was a Complete College Act performance funding. Remember, we've had a sea change that we're going to start funding our colleges with performance funding. If you do what you say you're going to do, then we're going to reward you for it. If
Well,
you
was 17 million the net cut?
there was I'll give an example. The example I gave is Dyersburg State. They got $192,000 in performance funding. Their 2% cut was $250,000. So see, they had a loss. Now some might have, but it was almost a net. So there wasn't, you know. But if we'd have restored the 2%, then they could have indeed had true performance funding.
Yeah, but one of the crises we're starting to face in this country is student loan debt. I mean, I read some of the data; it exceeds credit card debt. Now that's a crisis, and now and we need to try to hold down the cost of colleges, universities, and where this is going to allow it to go up, we had a way to keep it down as best we could, and so that's something that was just disturbing to do. Several things we proposed we thought were very reasonable. Very affordable within the money we had without this is not some new programs we're talking about putting in. We're talking about funding traditional programs that we've had here, and we were disturbed that they weren't put in the budget.
And the last thing I'll say about the budget is, there was $160 million in core reserves that the governor restored 130 million of them. So that means we left out 20% of the core reserves that weren't restored. And those core reserves are things like developmental disabilities, children's services, mental health, those for people who have, have difficulty helping themselves.
Rich, as it relates to that increase in the college, or decrease in the college funding, as you know, I sat on education for a very long time, and the trend is that every year in Tennessee, tuition has almost gone up. The last 14 years, 16 years, 18 years. And every time it increases, what it does is it simply denies more and more young people being able to have access because of the financial aspect of it. It's too high. Now, the chairman talks about just how much collectively debt is around the country, but you have two problems. You have this increased debt that these young people can't afford to pay because they're not able to find the right kind of job, or competitive jobs commensurate with their skill level. Then you have the denying of those that would be able to afford it don't get in. So you're further squeezing the middle class and poor people, denying them the ability to access college education because tuition is just extremely too high. It's too high.
There's been some upsetting things, a dozen things that come up as we all talk, and we can probably meet every day this week and not get to the end of everything's happening this year. This was an action-packed session, no matter which side of the aisle you're on. But any more questions from you guys?
I did have one more.
Yes.
There's a bill before the governor now that would require family life curricula to be abstinence-centered. Was that bill really necessary in your opinion?
I think we have something that's working fine now. I think that these guys are obsessed with sex this year. I don't know if they had it on the brain, and I just think we had something that's working well. I mean, the good Lord gave young kids the ability to procreate and have those hormones running through their body, and so things like that happen, and kids are curious and they're going to do those things. Now we should try to encourage abstinence and things like that, but we also should encourage a proper education for kids to handle those situations. And what we had, I think, was adequate. I think most of the experts said it was adequate, but we had a retired Bell South employee that knows more about it than anybody else in the state of Tennessee, so he decided to file a bill, and the Republican board followed him.
Well, a little shorter answer to that.
Education, you go ahead and.
Oh, I was just going to say, a little shorter answer to that is the executive director of the State Board of Education said it wasn't needed.
Right.
Well, John DeBerry kind of took you guys to task on the floor about this. So what sort of
Well,
and is that colleagues there?
Look, we have a big coalition. As I told you earlier, we had about 30 guys who followed us off a cliff, and we have some more that are there with us most of the time. John is a preacher. He has different views than some of us on some of these matters, and I respect John's opinion. He's a good man. And I disagree with him on this particular one. But if you go back and look, we got Eddie Bass voted Republican when he voted with us his whole career, but he's still a Democrat. We had him in our party, so we're a little more broader based than they are. They kind of on far to the right, they're tipping the table that way, but our bunch is more spread out.
Well, I'd say this about John's remarks. I happen to agree with him. The problem was this bill didn't do anything
That's probably
at all to help that.
Yeah.
Well, after his speech, sort of several Democrats were visibly and audibly upset at him, whereas some of the more right-wing Republicans came over and sort of hugged him and cheered with him. I mean, it had to rile your side of the aisle a little bit.
Well, things he was saying, he's talking about responsibility and single family homes and what we need to do. That's all great. It had nothing to do with this bill, as Craig said. But I think what there's more upset, Democrats are more upset with, not with John, is that they cut him off and there was not a response. And some of the people in the Black Caucus, some of the females in the Black Caucus felt like that John DeBerry was not the spokesman for, they didn't want that to be perceived as spoken for the Black Caucus on that issue, and they cut us off before we had a chance to let other people respond to that, and they were